Hi everyone, my name's Rasco, and today I'm going to be giving you guys a little overview of exactly how the Roman Empire collapsed and what happened leading up to its collapse. So just a little historical overview. Rome wasn't always an empire, it started off as a republic. It started off as only in the Italian peninsula, but eventually, around the time of Caesar and Augustus, who I'll get into in a moment, this is about the size of the empire. So it started really changing from a republic to an empire under the rule of Augustus, and he was Caesar's heir. And basically what he did was he was the one to really consolidate the imperial power. He was the first emperor of Rome. And he did that through, obviously, being well-liked by the people in the Senate, making him the sole ruler of this entire empire at the time he was alive. So following his death, Rome went through many dynasties, as we can see here, and it reached its max height in power in 117, sorry for the next slide, under Trajan. And this is around the size of the empire that it stays up until its collapse. And the dynasty that we really want to pay attention to here is the Severn dynasty, because this last guy in the Severn dynasty, his name was Caracalla, right here, pictured on the top right. And he was the final ruler of the Severn dynasty. And after his death is pretty much when the fall of Rome started and when its steep collapse started happening. So at the time of Carcalla's rule, he wasn't the best ruler. He spent a lot of money. He was very lavish. He built a lot of stuff, as you can see here on the bottom left. These are called the baths of Caracalla. These are huge baths, expensive. I actually saw this in this summer, and it's a massive complex, and I could not imagine how much it costs or how much it cost him to build and what it even looked like. But regardless, he spent a lot of money doing a lot of stuff, and obviously he didn't have money to run the rest of the empire. And one thing about Rome is that only the citizens had to pay taxes. A lot of the people who lived in Rome at the time weren't citizens, and they didn't have to pay taxes, so the empire was missing out on a lot of money by not having to be citizens. And what Caracalla did was pass his Edict of Caracalla, which basically gave every single free man in Rome citizenship, meaning they had to pay taxes. Now, that is good because it did fix the issue at the time, but what that also did, if we go back to the picture of the empire, was if we imagine before the Edict, Rome was the only place where governors, where leaders could come from. That's where all the power sat. All the power sat from the people who were born in Rome, coming out of Rome, and those politicians there. All of a sudden, making everybody equal and giving everybody citizenship across the empire sort of decentralizes Rome and makes it drop in power as compared to another city. Because imagine a city up here in Britain all of a sudden has the same pull and same power as Rome. So that's kind of where things started going poorly following the death of Caracalla, because soon after his death, there was something called the crisis of the 3rd century. Now, the crisis of the 3rd century was around a 50-year period where 20 emperors all rose up with their armies and proclaimed themselves emperor. And this led to, as you could imagine, a lot of civil war. And this all does stem from Caracalla's decision to make everybody citizens. Now, everybody wants a shot at the throne. Everybody believes they should be it, that their area has the same power as Rome, and they all start to rise up and start to fight the empire. And this was one of the, honestly, many times that the empire collapsed, or almost collapsed. And as you can see here on the bottom right, here's a picture of what the empire looked like at the time. There's 4 different big groups, along with Rome itself here. And it was a really messy time full of economic collapse, plague, invasions from barbarians here in the north, and a fragmentation of the empire. Now, this thankfully did come to an end in 284 with the rule of Diocletian. And Diocletian did one very important thing to sort of stop Rome from its path to destruction. And he created the Tetrarchy, which was having 4 rulers across 2 halves of an empire, meaning each half had 1 ruler. And this restored stability for a time while he was ruler and a little bit after. And what that did was have 2 rulers for each half, meaning that the power was more balanced and there wasn't one person who controlled everything. That could lead to a collapse if somebody got too power hungry or wasn't doing their job. So this was sort of like a check and balance that he pulled in. And as we can also see, as I previously mentioned, Caracalla's decision to make Rome not as important by giving everybody citizenship, all of a sudden these 4 cities where the rulers live throughout the empire aren't in Rome. They're all throughout the empire. And this kind of, again, makes it just another city. You know, it's not the capital. It's just another city in the empire. That's not where the importance of the empire is any. Now, following Diocletian's death, unfortunately, this Tetrarchy did not work. Following the death of Diocletian, the Tetrarchy collapsed as the 4 rulers started to fight each other, started to proclaim themselves emperor, and it was a whole other cycle. But one man came out victorious, and that was Constantine. Constantine the Great was one of the final rulers of the Roman Empire, and he brought stability again for a time. But mainly what he did was he officially split the empire into East and West, and most importantly, he moved the capital to Constantinople and sort of made that a seat of power for the empire and left it to be its own entity, if you will. He just commanded the West, or the East, sorry, and gave the West to somebody else. And that guy was in charge of the West, and Constantine enjoyed his stay on the East, where it was prosperous, rich, and there was just more stuff going on, and there was more developed than it was in the West. And this change from having Rome be the seat of the empire to Constantinople and leaving the West to fend for itself obviously isn't a good thing, because that led to a lot of instability. All of a sudden, Rome is left to fend for itself without the help of its more powerful ally. It has to fight off countless barbarians and invasions, and it's plagued with even more stability and even more civil war from the time of Constantine in around 310 to about 410, when it was sacked by barbarians for the first time in 800 years. And this is basically where it was the end of Rome, pretty much, because after this first sacking, they could never get their power back, they could never get their strength back. More and more territory throughout the empire started getting taken by barbarians, and they lost all their power. And then in 455 it was sacked again, and finally in 476 the Western Roman Empire collapsed, and it was no longer It was no longer there. It disappeared off the face of the earth, if you will. And the East continued until 1453 as the Byzantine Empire, but Rome itself collapsed, and that empire is lost to history after this. So, in conclusion, the empire collapsed due to Caracalla's initial decision to give everybody citizenship as that decentralized power in Rome. All of a sudden now everybody has the same power, everybody's more ambitious, they want to take control of their territory, of the empire. So that destabilizes Rome, leading to the crisis of the 3rd century with 20 emperors in 50 years. A massive period of instability. So Rome barely recovered from that with Diocletian's tetrarchy, and that failed also, leading to another civil war. And even upon Constantine's sort of success in restabilizing the empire, the West, Rome itself, was left to fend for itself, while all the power and all the money moved to the East. Rome was left poor and undeveloped, and unable to stop barbarian invasions that came down, which led to its collapse. So, thank you guys for watching. I hope you learned something, and I'll see you guys next time. So, thank you so much for watching.